Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the surprisingly complex world hidden inside a completely everyday snack. I mean, it's something you've probably eaten hundreds of times without a second thought. But as we're about to see, there's a literal miracle of engineering sitting right there at your fingertips, just waiting to be cracked open. So, have you ever tried to crack a closed pistachio with your teeth? Come on, we have all been there, right? You're enjoying a handful of pistachios, you get to that one stubborn, completely sealed nut, and you think, oh, I'll just bite this open. And instantly, you regret it. It feels like you're biting into a solid block of granite. Your jaw aches, you panic for a second that you just chipped a tooth, and usually the tiny pistachio wins the battle. But have you ever actually stopped to ask why it's so incredibly difficult? What on earth makes this tiny millimeter-thick shell practically indestructible?
Part 1. The microscopic jigsaw puzzle. Zooming into the shell's cellular structure.
Okay, let's dive into this. To figure this out, Associate Professor Dr. Notborga Gierlinger and her team at Vienna's University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences decided to look closer. And I mean much closer. They threw this everyday shell under advanced electron microscopes to finally unlock its structural secrets. And what they found is absolutely fascinating. You see, the shell isn't just some solid, uniform piece of wood. It's actually composed of microscopic cells that act exactly like a super-complex, three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. Imagine a puzzle, but instead of flat pieces laying on a table, these are bulbous, round pieces locking into each other in literally every single direction. Up, down, left, right, forward, and backward. They have these round protrusions that interlock perfectly to create this virtually unbreakable biological matrix. And the complexity of this matrix is just staggering. Look at this number, 14. In this microscopic 3D puzzle, every single individual cell is tightly locked and connected to an average of 14 neighboring cells. Just think about the sheer structural integrity that provides. If you try to pull, bite, or break just one cell, the mechanical force is instantly and evenly distributed across 14 others. It's a total masterpiece of load-bearing architecture, and it's all happening on a scale that is completely invisible to our naked eye.
Now, the researchers had actually seen something kind of similar before when looking at walnut shells, which, as we know, are notoriously tough nuts too. The walnut also uses an interlocking cellular puzzle. But the pistachio shell, it takes this biological engineering to an entirely different, extreme level. The cells in the pistachio have structures that closely resemble the ball and socket mechanism of the human hip joint. Yeah, you heard that right. The exact same mechanical joint that lets us walk around and carry our entire body weight every single day.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how advanced the pistachio's armor actually is. The cells in the pistachio shell have 3 times as many interlocking lobes as the ones found in a walnut. That's 3 times the connection points. So the interlocking is incredibly dense. It essentially triples down on the 3D jigsaw puzzle design, making the shell way more resilient than regular wood and punching way, way above its weight class in sheer toughness.
Part 2. The toughness paradox. The mechanical contradiction of the shell.
So this microscopic structure leads us straight into a brilliant mechanical contradiction, one that's had top scientists literally scratching their heads in amazement. To put this extreme resistance into perspective, let's look at a quote from Professor Carl Nicholas of Cornell University, who is a leading voice in this field. He says, "I was surprised by the different levels of response to mechanical forces in the structure of pistachio and walnut shells. Have you ever tried cracking a pistachio with a hammer? I have. It's not easy." Just pause and think about that for a second. A prominent scientist with access to all this advanced lab equipment is just marveling at the fact that a tiny seed casing can brush off the brute, blunt force trauma of a steel hammer.
And that brings us to the crucial paradox here. On one hand, the shell is astonishingly resistant to external hammer blows, right? It's this impenetrable fortress designed to protect the precious seed inside from predators, harsh weather, extreme impact, you name it. Yet miraculously, on the other hand, when the seed is ripe, mature, and ready to grow, the shell opens naturally, entirely on its own. The fortress essentially unlocks its own unbreachable gates from the inside so the seed can be reached. It's tough enough to take a hammer strike, but delicate enough to gently split apart to allow for new life. It's mind-blowing.
Looking at this level of sheer perfection, our source material poses some really fascinating questions. Did this 3D puzzle system form by itself? Is that hip joint-like connection a coincidence? Now, I present these questions to you neutrally today because they mark a significant pivot point in our narrative. We're shifting from just biological observation over to some deeper philosophical implications. Because when we see a system of interlocked 14-point hip joint-like microscopic shock absorbers that perfectly balances ultimate defense with perfect timing, well, it inevitably prompts us to wonder about where it all came from.
Part 3. Nature's Shock Absorbers, Biomimicry and Human Engineering.
Regardless of where you stand philosophically on this, one thing is absolutely for sure in the scientific community: human engineers are paying very close attention. And this brings us to the incredible field of biomimicry. This is basically the science of studying nature's best ideas and imitating them to solve modern human engineering problems. Because nature has been successfully using this ultimate shock-absorbing technology for millions of years, scientists are actively studying the tiny pistachio to help save human lives. Researchers are trying to mimic this microscopic 3D puzzle to build advanced vehicle safety systems. Just imagine, cars with crumple zones that absorb impact exactly like a pistachio shell. They're looking at it to completely revolutionize helmet design for athletes and construction workers, and they're exploring it to create lighter, stronger protective equipment and body armor.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how it circles back to the ultimate theological question our source text raises. Who created this design? If the absolute top human engineers and scientists in state-of-the-art laboratories are struggling to replicate this flawless shock-absorbing structure, the author of our text invites us to consider the origin of the original masterpiece. It introduces a profoundly philosophical dimension right into the middle of the scientific discourse around biomimicry.
Part 4. The Final Reflection, a Perspective from the Quran.
So, zooming out completely from the microscopes and modern engineering labs for a moment, our source bridges the gap to a much older perspective drawn from ancient scripture. Specifically, it points to Surah At-Tin, verse 1 from the Quran, which translates to, "by the fig and the olive." The author respectfully highlights that in this ancient scripture, a divine oath is actually being taken on fruits. We see these ordinary everyday objects elevated to a status of profound significance. And the text suggests this really beautiful underlying harmony between the reverence found in this ancient verse and the mind-blowing modern microscopic discoveries we've just been exploring.
Which brings us to the concluding, thought-provoking sentence of our explainer. Reflecting on both the ancient verse and the cutting-edge science, the source text suggests, perhaps it is drawing attention to the miracle in the shell of that fruit. And that leaves us with a really powerful idea to deeply ponder. The next time you grab a simple handful of pistachios, remember that you aren't just holding a snack. You're holding a total marvel of bioengineering, a microscopic 3D fortress, and, just perhaps, a tiny, perfectly designed miracle hidden right in plain sight.